All right, so right now what I have is I have the beginnings of my foreground, middle ground, background project. So here I have my foreground drawn out and cut out, and I'm going to open that up and leave it aside, and I'm going to focus on the middle ground. The middle ground runs kind of in the middle of my paper, and the middle ground of my Dr. Seuss project here is actually going to be Whoville. So I want to think about, what do the houses in Whoville look like? And that's something that you need to help me decide, and you need to decide for yourself. What do your houses look like? If I were drawing a normal house, I would keep things rather square. If I'm drawing a Dr. Seuss style house, I'm going to be a little bit wilder. So rather than being perfectly square, I'm going to be a little bit extra curvy. I'm going to allow things to have a little bit more different details than they typically would. So I'm going to put my door there as super tall and thin. Maybe I'll put a wreath on the door up here. Maybe I'll put a window in over there. In a normal house, I know that wouldn't be that close to the side. But again, I'm not talking about a normal house. I'm talking about a Dr. Seuss house. Dr. Seuss loved layer and texture. And so lots of times when we're looking at a Seuss house, we're looking at a very interesting creation that doesn't always seem to make sense. Sometimes doors and windows are way off to the side. Sometimes they're in different places where you have a hard time telling how many layers this house actually has. And that's okay. Okay, so I want you to think about your Seuss village. Now, your Seuss village could be normal standard houses. They can have chimneys. They can have big puffs of smoke if you really want them to. They could be houses that have really weird curly details, right? I wouldn't put it back past Dr. Seuss to have a house with a really weird curvy detail in it. That is something that he would do. I also wouldn't put it past Dr. Seuss to have a house that's got lots of layers to it. So maybe I have a house with a sign or a building in it. Maybe it's got a weird front porch that comes off to one side. That might be something he would do, and that's okay if that happens in your Seuss village. So feel free to be a little wild and a little crazy as you begin to think about what you're putting into your Dr. Seuss project, because this is Seuss after all. He wasn't ever known to be completely normal when he drew, so you can feel free to draw in a window that's sideways, or to draw in a door that's curved, or to draw on a wall that curves, but go ahead and draw Seuss or draw Whoville. Once you have Whoville drawn, then you're going to want to do just like we did to the last layer, and you're going to want to cut it out. So as you draw those top layers, think a little bit if they get too wild and crazy. Sometimes they can be tough to cut. You might need to simplify just a little bit here or there, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to come through and I'm going to cut out the top. I'm going to cut all the way to my edge line just like I did before. Okay, and just like I did before, I'm going to cut out the basic shapes first, and then I'm going to come back to those tricky cuts. So that really cool curvy roof I drew a minute ago is definitely going to be a tricky cut that's going to take me some time to get just cut right. If you do easier details, you won't have that. But I think that's part of what makes this Seuss style to me, is that those tricky, crazy, kind of weird details in there. So I'm going to go ahead, cut that all out so you can see what I have. I now have my middle ground there with my couple of houses in it. There's my foreground. So now we can see through this gate into Whoville is kind of leading up to these houses in the background. Okay, so there's my Whoville. Now I'm ready to move on to my background.